The purpose of this session is to provide you with feedback on the discussion that took place just before lunch. And that has been done during lunch, putting this feedback together. And I want to thank the facilitators, and I want to thank the legal and academic team who've helped us do that. And we'll show you a number of slides in a moment which capture the feedback. But it's not just people here have been following matters. There's been a very considerable amount of attention, social media comments as well, which have been coming in all morning and which are being tracked. And I want to thank Michael McGuffin and Hugh Murphy, who have been doing that at the back of the room. So from the social media side, essentially 3 or 4 comments. Nearly all comments in favour of reducing age below 17, ideally 16. General consensus that more urgent matters than this should be discussed. And one person, Sean Glennon, a UCD student, said he became involved in political party at 15 years of age. I know there were another comment as well from as far away as Edinburgh, which said that, well, the convention is a waste of time. So it's not all completely adulatory. So just that we keep keep a perspective. Now, in terms of the issues that were the summary of what you discussed. I'm going to let you stay on, because there's no point in me just reading through them. But these are the points that were made and the tables that made these points. So, for example, we have 17-year-olds. What we want to do here, because we're not going to have time for everybody to speak about everything. So if with your permission, I will call on a number of tables to maybe elaborate on points that's been raised here, and therefore we will hopefully avoid the repetition. So, for example, the very first point here. Let me see. What should we focus upon? Well, maybe the very first point on the list, the people who are saying in favour that 17-year-olds have other legal rights, and that's a strong argument in favour of changing. Table 14. Who would like maybe just to elaborate on that particular point? Could maybe the facilitator nominate somebody? Thank you. Stephen.
Stephen Agnew. Yeah, when we looked at the issue that young people at that age can get married, legally can become sexually active, and I think another point that is young people can start employment at 16 or 17 and be paying taxes, so should have a say in how those taxes are spent. So, you know, a lot of the age limits of 18 are about protection of young people, and they're there rightly so to protect their health. But in terms of, certainly feel that voting's an entitlement and a privilege, so extending that to a younger person isn't going to do them harm. Indeed, it's going to further empower them.
Okay, thank you. I'll just pick one more from this, which, even though it's only one table that made the point, I think it's an important issue. Would encourage greater participation. Who from table 12 would like to speak to that?
Well, I think the point was made by Aideen here that any kind of effort that can encourage greater participation is worthwhile because it will increase political awareness at all ages, and I think that was the point that was being made by you, Aideen.
There was a
Just
sense,
say your name, if you would.
My name is Aideen Hayden. There was a sense that was, I suppose, enunciated at the table that, you know, younger people are having laws made that affect them, and that reducing the age of voting would give them a greater say in the laws that are being made that affect them. And that by reducing the age to we actually favoured, those at the table who favoured reducing the age, favoured reducing it to 16. And there was a general sense among those who were in favour of reducing it that it was important that it encompassed transition year. and that transition year was an important factor in assisting younger people to be more discriminating about how they exercise their franchise. And that in encompassing all of that together, that it would encourage greater participation, but not just greater participation, more involved participation, participation that was more discriminating.
Okay. Could we move on to the next slide? And here, could I ask this issue, the second last bullet point would help young people to develop voting habits. Could we go to table 1 to get somebody to speak to that? Table 1 is over there.
So that was from the...
Again, name. I know just a formality. I want to do this. Yeah.
That was feeding on from the point that Dr. Reedy made in the opening presentation, that if people start voting earlier, that they're more likely to keep that up. So we were suggesting that if we get people, again, those of us, I think who favour the minority at our table, but who favour reducing the voting age, we're similarly having a discussion that perhaps it should be 16 rather than 17, that would be a more significant difference. But if you get people to start at 16 and get that habit while they're in school, that they might actually keep it up, and it would increase turnout in the long run as well.
Okay. Thanks very much indeed. I mean, maybe the last point from this one. Could somebody from table 9 talk about how changing the voting age would empower young people? The implication of that.
Tom O'Donnell, I'm the facilitator at the table. On the empowerment issue, it was clear with some of the discussions that took place, particularly on vulnerable children. It was said that vulnerable children kind of had enough on their plate. But in this case, it was suggested that even with the vulnerable people, that if they had a right to vote, that would be one area of their life where they could be empowered, even if not in other areas for vulnerable children.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom. All right, let's move on then to the slides showing the arguments against. And this is the first slide. There are 2 slides in this regard as well. Could I ask this point, which is maybe a fairly fundamental point, it wouldn't solve anything. Could I ask table 7 to comment on that?
Hi, Catherine Murray. Yeah, we did. We meant it wouldn't solve the political issues or the political system, and it wouldn't make it any different to what it is at the moment. That was basically our point on that. But we had people at our table, I think, in favour of it as well. So I think that needs to be said also.
Okay.
Yeah, could we just say our table number wasn't included in the in favour comments, the number of our table, because there was some people at our table.
Okay.
I would say it was fairly balanced.
Okay, well, I mean, we can rectify that. Thanks very much, Catherine. Now, could I ask maybe this point, because it maybe bears on the wider debate. 17 is not young enough, it should be 16. Could I ask somebody from table 6 to speak to that? If we've hesitation there, let the facilitator nominate somebody.
I think 2 of us argued in favour.
Name again. Sorry, Robert.
Sorry, Robert Dowds.
Yeah.
I think 2 of us argued in favour of a voting age of 16, and those of us who did, I think, did so on the basis that it was it was probably a more stable time in a teenager's life than 18, and I suppose we were a bit taken by the arguments made by the people from the Youth Council in that. Is there anything else I should add?
Brian McLaughlin. Excuse me. Another point was just, I suppose, we are a democracy. We want to go ahead as a leading democracy country, like we abolish cigarette smoking in the workplace. Why not get ahead of the crowd or other countries who might want to reduce the voting age to 16 and look to get ahead in that sense as well?
Okay. Well, let's go back to the very first bullet point on this, little public support, because obviously that's an issue. If at the end of the day there is little public support for this change, the government is going to be less disposed to suggest it. So, who from table 13? I haven't asked 13 to speak yet, have I? Who from table 13 will speak to that? Name again, sorry, Catherine.
Catherine Noon.
Yeah.
With regard to the public support aspect, we really didn't feel that there was much concrete evidence to support that view, and I think we feel that, I hope I'm right in saying this, but I think our group felt that, we would really need to put it to a referendum to find out, because there's so little actual evidence available at this stage on that. And I don't think that really we felt that it was very accurate, that the information that's available to date.
Okay.
I think is that.
Could we move on to this? Thank you very much, Catherine. Could we move on to the next slide, Teresa? And here I want to take the first bullet point, because it was obviously a point made by Noel, who spoke from the Institute. Would adultify slippery slope eroding childhood. Table 4. Somebody would like to comment on that?
Thanks very much, Michael Anderson. And I'll pass this on now. But like we see where our name is up there, we weren't so concerned about the adultifying kids and the slippery slope as the idea that if something is set at 17, that there would be a creep into other things, even things like the definition of children's allowance and so forth. It was much more in that respect. But would you like to speak about that, Sorka? About the idea of creep, or the idea of why we shouldn't go to...
We had Sorka O'Neill. We had a few different opinions on the creep process, but also regarding juveniles on the criminal process, things like that. It could creep onto other issues, as you already see. One of your points earlier on was that there are other legal rights for children, and I think you're calling them children, so that kind of speaks for itself as well. But I know some of us had issues about the age of 17 is pretty delicate, and there's a lot of pressures with leave insert, things like that already. I think was that it? About it.
Okay, fine. Thank you for that. And maybe the last one here again. I think it's of maybe a more general interest. Not enough political education for young people in Ireland yet. Somebody from table 5.
We kind of disagreed. There was some strong agreement on both sides of the argument. Oh, sorry, John Fitzgibbon, facilitator. There's some strong agreement on both sides of the argument, with one person strongly in favour and one person strongly against, and a lot kind of leading to either side. But the one thing we did agree on was the need for political education for young people in Ireland, about a practical element. We disagree about whether it should be compulsory to leaving a certain level, with a slight emphasis on not having compulsory. But Finn Barrett, you're very passionate about this. Do you want to?
Finbar O'Brien. From my experience with kids and talking to them, well, I won't say kids, young adults, is that if you involve them in something, they get very interested, and they kind of cling on to it and they take it on board. Whereas by leaving it at 18, you're kind of ignoring them. And from my experience, like I said, that if you give them the chance, they will take it. And they're the people that are going to run the country eventually, so I can't see why he shouldn't be.
Okay. Now, could we go to the final slide with other comment, and I'll let you look at these for a moment. And there's two, the first 2 points are actually in total contradiction to each other or disagreement with each other. And maybe we'll have speakers on. Now, I'm conscious that each of these tables have already spoken, but we'll work that out and we'll get a balance as the afternoon wears on. Maybe table 7. Could you advance the arguments in favour of reducing the age of candidacy?
Hi, Alan Green. In this table, we were discussing the idea of reducing the age of candidacy in line with reduction in the voting age, as we felt it would create a greater disconnect if we were to reduce the voting age and not have a parallel reduction in the candidacy age, because there's a greater gap then where you're voting for candidates who are much older than yourself, potentially. Particularly in the case of the presidency, where there could be, if we reduce the voting age to 16 or 17, 18 or 19 years in the difference in age. So it's a long time to be voting, but not to be eligible yourself for the position.
Okay. And then the argument against, table 9.
Joan Stewart, we felt that in order to be a public representative, you need to bring a certain amount of life experience with you. And that if we reduced it to 16 or 17, that life experience wouldn't be there to be an effective public representative. And that's why we'd be against reducing the age of candidacy.
Okay, thank you very much, Joan. Well, then maybe the very last bullet point on the, and it'll also give tables who haven't had a chance to speak yet, introduce a trial period, and we'll take table 2 and table 3 in each case to speak.
Keith Burke, Kildare. When we discussed this, we had most people decided on reducing the age, and we're agreeing on reducing. I was not, to be honest. But from hearing in the last 5 minutes, I'm sort of inclined to turn my vote to a yes. More on what people have said here in the last 5-10 minutes. However, when I said no, I was open to having a trial period of, I don't know, 5-10 years, whatever it takes to do a good quantitative study. But having set goals after that trial period of not so much doing surveys, but actually possibly reforming the Register of Electors system to have age groups. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Keith. I mean, it's an interesting comment because, in a way, this is part of the process of people hearing arguments, assessing them in their minds, and eventually coming to a conclusion. And of course, when we finish this session now, we're not going to decide anything, we're not going to vote for anything. You're going to go and think about it, or it'll be stewing away in your minds overnight. And we're coming back in the morning to have a further discussion and then vote. So this is part of the process that we think should work to best effect. Could we have the final word on, at least on the slides, from table 3? Again, introducing a trial period.
Thank you, Chairman. Jerry Buttimer. Our consensus was to support the changing of the voting age, but we felt, or I suggested perhaps, that we might look at the concept of not on a trial period, but on an electoral, maybe in a local election level, to see, given we asked Teresa for her figures in terms of Jersey, where there was a quarter of the 16-year-olds only voted, given there was a small population, but we just, if we could see what the pattern would be like, perhaps as a way to incrementally introduce it.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Teresa, would you like to just reflect on what you've heard for the last 30 minutes?
Okay, yeah, I suppose the first thing I'd like to say is that we've also had submissions from the public coming in over the last number of weeks. Sorry, I think here. We've also had submissions coming in from the public over the last number of weeks, and a lot of what's come back today was also reflected in those in those submissions. So we've had close to 30 submissions, and they broke down fairly evenly. But many of the ideas that have come back with regard to perhaps looking at 16 or even having a trial period, or looking at supports that would be put in place to, I suppose, lower the voting age, were reflected in the discussion today, and those were in in the documents. But there were also very serious concerns about whether or not the system is sufficiently well developed at the moment to be able to deal with bringing additional 17-year-olds into the system. I suppose, kind of, to be more precise about it, that really there are a lot of problems with the voting system as it's structured at the moment, and maybe those should be addressed before we started to look at reducing the voting age. So much of the discussion in the debate today is, again, it's reflected in the wider discussions that we've seen coming through.
So it means maybe you are really representative of the population.
Absolutely.
So, okay, we have a few minutes now, actually, before we need go on to the next session. So I'm taking comments from the floor. I see two in the first. Derek.
Thank you very much, Tom. Derek Keating is my name. The point I made during the course of discussion was in relation to the age of consent, which of course means that young people of 17 years of age are within their legal rights to engage in sexual activity. And yet, at the same time, of course, those very same people can't vote until they're 18. And the question I had, I'd be very interested to hear if the panel had an opinion on that, if they wanted to articulate a view on that very point. Thank you.
I mean, the panel is here to provide, I think, clarity about facts. I'm not sure the panel is here to provide opinion.
I mean, Chair, no, I mean, we are here to try, insofar as we can, to support the process, but it's for the members to express the opinion, not for us.
Yeah. So, Derek, you, the people, are sovereign in this matter. Thomas.
I just wanted to make one point.
Name, please.
Sorry, Thomas Byrne. I wanted to make one point, and that was to just, and I still haven't decided in my own mind, actually, I still need that time to stew over this issue, but I was looking at the countries that have reduced the voting age, and Teresa has given a list, and there's a list of 16 and a list for 17, and if we look at the countries, and I won't name them, I have to say, if I were to agree to reduce the voting age, I think I'd rather be lining up with the list of countries that have reduced it to 16 rather than those that have reduced it to 17. And I think that is worth bearing in mind. Where is the vanguard of international opinion? Now, we don't have to follow that, but you know, we can help lead change on this, and I don't know whether countries will settle on 17. They're sort of a motley group that have done that. And I hope that point is taken in the best possible way.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other comments? Yeah. 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 Again, Anne, could you just repeat your name and so on?
Thank you, Chairman. It's Anne Ferris. In relation to the point on the compulsory voting, which our table discussed, I think I made the point that you know, a lot of people who are 18 years of age, and indeed in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on, don't bother going out to vote. And I think the point is that if we allow the 17-year-olds or the 16-year-olds indeed to vote, it's up to each individual to go out and vote. There is no compulsory, there's no, you know, people aren't mandated to vote. You're not going to end up in prison if you don't vote. So I believe that it should be open, the option should be there for the 17-year-olds who want to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
My name is David Cullinan. Just to make one general point, that if we do eventually move towards reducing the voting age to either 17 or 16, that it's part of a holistic package, that we don't just reduce the voting age, that is part of a process that involves, for example, dealing with the problems with the registration system, making it easier for people to get registered, education in schools, the times that we hold elections. If we look at the presidential election in America, we saw that people had an opportunity to vote over a long time period. So it should be part of not just giving people the right to vote, but then making it as easy as possible for people to vote, especially young people. And also, of course, crucially, the days that we hold elections, if it is only on a single day, as we know historically, has not favoured young people, because if they're in college or whatever it is. So I think we just have to look at this as part of a process and not just a one-item thing that we reduce the voting age itself.
Okay. Thanks, David. Seamus.
Thanks, Chairman. Seamus Kirk. Really 2 points. The reducing the voting age just for local elections. I'm just wondering, would the panel have any view, will a constitutional amendment be necessary in those circumstances? Or would it be merely a matter for Dáil elections or presidential or whatever, Europeans?
That is a sort of a question, but it's not really an opinion. That's a matter of fact. So maybe while Leah is checking that,
just getting the article. So
could I move?
And just Chairman, just make the final point. It was about on the political education. I think there was a consensus at this table that there is a need to intensify the efforts in that regard. For instance, we have in the Oireachtas an outreach facility, and I suppose because of budgetary constraints there has been some curtailment of it, and it's a pity because it's been quite successful, as the clerk to the committee will know. But the aspect of it, of the political education, the issue of the importance of economics, and particularly our experiences since we joined the euro in this country, and it's very relevant to political decision making. And I think maybe some advice in relation to that to schools when they're preparing a curriculum for political education, that perhaps that look at basic economics to incorporate it into it.
Thanks, Seamus. Tom.
Chairman?
Yeah, sorry. It's Tom down there first.
Tom Burke. Just on the issue of competency and maturity, really I don't have a problem as long as we accept that a person is mature. But if they're mature, they have to be mature enough to have a drink. And I find it strange that we should be saying you're not mature enough to have an alcoholic drink, but you are mature enough to go out and elect a government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I thought, Michelle, you wanted to speak, and then...
Thank you. Michelle Mulhern is my name. We had very interesting discussions at our table, but just I think what we're really trying to look at here is the issue of how we include young people, and particularly in a time, if we were to assess it, where a lot of us, and I suppose we look at young people in particular, don't see how they fit in or interconnect into society or where their place is. And I think in doing that and in reaching out, we have to look at what it means to be a citizen and have value in this country. And just, we were talking here just before the lunch, and to me it means that we have to, when we look at citizenship, and I think we need to do it, I mean, we have religion in schools, what it means to exist in a community, because as a society we've moved along the path of individuality, which is good, but we all live in communities and in societies, and we need to know how to interact. But I suppose my point is that we're beyond economic units. And unfortunately, the Celtic Tiger seemed to put value on us only if we were being productive or we had some value that inherently had to do with material stuff. And their whole country is a casualty of it, and some in a terrible way. And some people don't know where they belong anymore, and we don't seem to be able to offer them a vision, and especially young people, as to what it means to have a meaningful life without having stuff. And so I think that the most important part, if I just maybe to give the nub of it, is that unless that idea of being a citizen is actually introduced at an earlier stage, and it's not just me on my own, but there are a lot of us contending with a lot of the same issues and all the good things that's in our society. And I think that has to begin in school, because it's way too ad hoc at the moment. And, you know, as I say, the same as we do it for religion, I think we could look at it, at doing what it means to live in a society and what sort of society we want, and have engagement at that point. And not people think, oh yeah, that's for politicians or that's for the people in the know. Everybody's vote is equal. No matter who you are or what you are. And just to bring that message back to young people. But I think we're about trying to draw people into you know, we're about circles of inclusiveness in our society. And I think it's a challenge for us across the board to say, well, what does it mean to be a citizen and have value in this country in where we are right now?
Okay, thanks very much, Michelle. I think we have clarification to Seamus's question a bit earlier on. Then we'll take a couple more comments.
Yeah, thank you. Just in relation to the local government query there, Article 28A of the Constitution actually says that every citizen who has the right to vote at an election for Dáil Éireann and such other persons as may be determined by law can vote in a local election. So that really means that statute law could add on other categories of persons other than the 18 years and over persons who are already defined in the Dáil elections. So again, I suppose, you know, it's free for you to make whatever recommendations you want, but it's an issue where there wouldn't necessarily have to be a constitutional referendum. But on the other hand, there could be a constitutional referendum on that if you wanted to set the age at 17 for local elections. You know, it's open either way on that issue. Is that clear enough? Yeah.
I think it's as clear as it can be made
Yeah.
at the moment. Yeah. Actually, I saw Katrina Ruan first here, and then we'll go to you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. So I mean, I'm afraid I have to exercise my own judgment on this. Katrina, you had, yeah.
Gur mágad agus is mise Katrina Ruan. Just ken den a rudí bhhailm Lord Twin Chorus Edicus sa Tuchart na Hern, East Ormond. I'm Katrina and I'm in the north. And one of the things we did discuss at the table here, and we had the benefit of having somebody in Parliament in the north and south, and actually people who used the education outreach. I think there's things that we can learn. I think we're all agreed at this table that there should be maximum educational outreach to schools. And one of the things we do that's innovative in the north, and we probably one of the reasons we were doing it is because there was a lack of democracy before, because it was direct rule. Now we have a system where the Assembly bring in schools, and then each party speak to the schools, whether they're primary or post-primary, just for 10 minutes, but it means they're brought in through a neutral system of the Assembly, and then they're facilitated to meet their local representatives or their six-county representatives. So I think it might be interesting for us to learn from the South and vice versa.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to take two more comments. One is here from Table 5, and then Maureen, and that will have the last word for the moment.
Hi, my name is Deirdre Donaghy. We had a couple of points I think are relevant to this. One was in relation to the idea that if you make it easier for college students, why is it a Thursday voting? The last referendum was on a Saturday, and we had the worst turnout almost in the history of the state. So I don't think the problem is going to be solved by making it a better day to vote or making it a younger age to vote. We came to a consensus that there's a lot in education, both in schools and in families and in youth groups, to educate people that it's a privilege to vote. It's something that was fought for, and it was something that we all have an obligation to use, and that was very important. And also we felt that as again I should say there's for and against at the table. There was also a concern that if you reduce the age to 16 or 17 with the aim of increasing voter turnout, you could actually end up proportionately having a worse turnout if you register all the 16 and 17-year-olds and only 25% of them turn out. So you could actually aim to increase the turnout and end up reducing it.
Okay, thank you. Maureen.
Maureen O'Sullivan, and it's just one brief comment. I find it rather ironic that we are discussing lowering the voting age to 17 or possibly 16, and yet we have nobody under 21 on the Constitutional Convention.
I think we may have Maureen. So maybe just to, would you, Table 3? And not only that, would you just like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name's Ian Cleary. I'm actually 19, but yeah, I'm a student, and I just felt it was part of my civic duty to take part and try and change the country. Thank you.
Okay, and I think we have
well, my name's John Kenny, and I'm 20, so I'm also in the under 21 category there.
Yeah. So there you are. That's the sense of community now. If there's any other candidates for this category.
I'm Megan, and I'm 19, and I'm kind of against lowering the voting age, because I just think that, as the pointer said earlier, that even if you reduce the voting age, the turnout might be lower. I think they should focus more on encouraging voting in like 18-year-olds and up, by like facilitating maybe like votings in colleges, and maybe like voting like you could vote in any constituency like once you have your voting card with you, and maybe introduce a subject such as CSB but for your Leaving Cert.
Okay, and maybe the last word could go to somebody who doesn't quite fit in the category, this category, no more than I do myself, Charlie Flanagan.
Can I accuse the chairman of ageism? No, I wouldn't. Just in relation to the issues, I see our table, Table 1, featuring under 3 headings here. We did discuss compulsory voting, but from the view that perhaps it wasn't the best of ideas. But in particular, I'd like to focus, Chair, on the matter of under 16s themselves. We know there are young people here, but we were struck by the fact that we didn't think that anybody representing the National Youth Council were 16 or under. Perhaps we probably formed the view that they were all over 18. And we're wondering what research, if any, is there available that 16-year-olds want to vote, would like to vote, and the same perhaps for 17. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. And maybe then the final word will go to Teresa in attempt to answer that.
Well, I can give you some information in relation to that particular question. There is research that has been conducted. The National Youth Council has done some. Actually, the Union of Students of Ireland have also conducted research, both quantitative and qualitative. They've done focus groups with threshold voters. And we also have international evidence, probably most closely from the United Kingdom, and it really all kind of points in the direction that those under 18, 16 and 17-year-olds, a majority of them actually are in favour of reducing the voting age, and there are very strong results in terms of their intention to vote. So if you ask them if they would vote if they were given the vote, those results are also quite high. So there's actually majority support. Now it's not unanimous, but it's a substantial majority of people in the 16 and 17 category do support that particular decision. But as I mentioned in the presentation, of course, the wider public, that is reversed.
Okay, I'm going to draw this to a close. I think what we've had this afternoon is just a reflection of the considerable diversity of views about the issue that we've actually been asked to consider, reducing the voting age. But it has also raised a whole wider range of issues about our political system, about our society, which will also need to be considered. So you now have the privilege of thinking about this overnight, coming back in the morning and voting. And we will be putting together a ballot paper which will attempt to reflect the discussion that we've had thus far without making it overly complicated. We won't have too many options, but we will have more than one option. So if I may thank everyone who contributed. I hope this is an efficient way of capturing and feeding back to you the discussions this morning. And we're going to conclude now, and we're going to now move on to the next topic. And a particular thank you to Teresa for her excellent presentation this morning.